Okay, so the cardiovascular system deals with the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. So we're going to completely talk about the cardiovascular system today. I just split up the cardiovascular system into different PowerPoints. One just deals with the blood vessels and the heart, where the other deals with the blood itself. Okay? And as I said, when I talk about the blood, I'm going to include a little bit of the lymphoid tissue, because it kind of falls in there. Okay? Therefore, I'm not going to directly lecture on the lymphoid tissue of the chapter. I'm just, whatever I want you to know, I'll just incorporate that in there. Okay, especially because I'm doing that, there might be some slides which are not in your PowerPoint. You might just have to take notes on a separate piece of paper. Okay? Now, cardiovascular system, it maintains homeostasis of the interstitial fluid. How? Because the cardiovascular system deals with multiple organ systems throughout our body. I only listed a few. It tends to correlate, or not correlate, interact with the digestive system, the respiratory system, the urinary system, the liver. How does it interact with the digestive system? Any idea? How does the cardiovascular system deal with the digestive system? Okay, well, one, blood, every single organ, but then I just specifically said digestive. So whatever you eat, the food, okay, it has to get broken down, and then it gets absorbed. Where does it get dumped into? It gets dumped into your bloodstream, right? How does the cardiovascular system deal with the respiratory system? How does it interact with the respiratory system? Exactly. So, gas, basically oxygen goes from our respiratory system into our bloodstream, and carbon dioxide goes from our bloodstream into the respiratory system. Okay, so gas exchange. How about the urinary system? How does the cardiovascular system deal with the urinary system or interact? Blood flows through the kidney and it's filtered. Okay, and from there, basically, after it's been filtered, urine is produced. Okay? And then liver. How about the liver?
Detoxification.
Detoxification, okay, that's one. Anything else? What do you think? I'll come back to that question because we haven't really talked about the blood yet, but you'll notice. I did not include, how does it interact with the bone?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Bone.
Is a blood made in form?
Exactly, the cellular component, right? The red blood cells, white blood cells, platelet, all of that is made by the bone. Okay, now, blood flow. I'm talking about the vessels, okay? So we have different type of vessels. Okay? You have heard of it, arteries, veins. So basically, how does the blood flow through these vessels? So, we have the heart here. From the heart, blood flows into big vessels called the arteries. Okay? From the heart, blood enters a vessel called the arteries. Now these arteries, of course, branch off into smaller arteries. Imagine them as like you have a tree. You have the bark, which splits up into branches, which further breaks up, okay? All of the arteries will break up into small arteries, which will break up into arterioles. Arterioles. Arterioles are basically smaller arteries. Okay? From the arterioles, it will enter basically capillaries. Capillaries. Okay? Now all of them are connected, it's just when I pick a different marker, it can't connect the dots. Okay, but it's supposed to be one flow. So from arteries, blood drains or dumps blood into the arteries. From the arteries, it enters arterioles. From the arterioles, it'll go into capillaries. Okay? From the capillaries, it enters veins. Not veins, venules. V-E-N-U-L-E-S, venules. Venules are small veins. Okay? All of the venules will come together and drain into veins. Okay? And then the veins will once again dump blood into the heart. That's how the flow occurs. Heart drains blood into arteries. Arteries turn into arterioles. Arterioles turn into capillaries. Capillaries turn into venules. Venules turn into veins, and they drain blood back into the heart. This is how blood flows throughout our body. Okay? Now, artery and arterioles, the difference, one of the difference is arterioles are small arteries. Okay? So arteries, first of all, we split up into smaller arteries, which are still arteries. Those arteries will even further divide into smaller arteries, which are still arteries. Those then turn into arterioles. Does that make sense? Okay? Then arterioles, from there, they will turn into capillaries. Capillaries to venules. The venules will come together, forming veins. And then blood goes back. So now let's look at the difference between artery and a vein. Artery carries oxygenated blood. Okay? Arteries carries oxygenated blood. Where veins carry deoxygenated blood. That's one difference. Arteries carry oxygenated, veins deoxygenated. Function of arteries. Carries less amount of blood under high pressure. So arteries, when you actually look at the volume inside an artery, it's not that much. There's less volume, but that volume is under high pressure. Okay? Where veins is complete opposite. High volume under low pressure. Does that make sense? Yes.
So veins carry more blood.
Exactly, but at a lower pressure. Where arteries do not carry that much blood, but it's under high pressure. Okay? Yes.
So arteries are thicker basically because they are under more pressure?
Yes.
Like the
So, yes,
Okay.
you will see when we actually look at the structure, the artery is much more thicker. Okay, they have a thicker layer. So those are the two main differences. Arteries, oxygenated, veins, deoxygenated. Arteries carry low volume at high pressure. Veins carry high volume but at low pressure. Okay, so they're opposite. Now, structure. This is the lumen. Okay, do you guys understand what a lumen means? Yes? Do you guys understand what a lumen means? No. Okay. That's fine. Sometimes I think you guys already know it. So, okay. Do you see this water bottle? Right? The walls are made by the plastic, right? The space where you actually find water is the lumen. Does that make sense? Okay. So basically, the black, what I do is a lumen, because if I spill this, all of this water, but there's a space in there, right? Where the space is where the fluid is found. or where that substance is actually found, that space, that hollow space, is called lumen of a vessel. Okay? When you're talking about the GI tract, the stomach is hollow, right? Because that's where the food has to be. Well, that's the lumen. Does that make sense? Okay.
How do you spell that?
L-U-M-E-N. Now, the lumen is surrounded by a layer. Now, there's no space. Okay, it's supposed to be touching it. Just letting you know, I did not purposely do that. Okay, there's no space. And here shows space because I can't exactly match it. There's no space. And this is actually the epithelium. The composition is epithelium. Okay? But what is of a vessel? The epithelium layer is called endothelium. Okay? Endothelium. Does that make sense? So the layer is called endothelium, but what is that layer? What is the composition? It's actually made up of epithelial cells. Does that make sense? Yes.
So the red part is the endothelium?
Yes, but its composition is epithelium. The layer is called endothelium. Okay? But what is that layer made up of? What kind of cells do you find in there? Do you find connective tissue? Do you find nervous tissue? What do you find? It's actually epithelial tissue, so it's epithelial cells. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the next layer, again, there's supposed to be no space, but it's supposed to be the thick layer. Now, the blue layer is actually the muscular layer. It's made up of smooth muscles. Within the smooth muscle, you see the squiggly lines, which are supposed to be elastic fibers. Okay, so the green squiggly lines are elastic fibers. So within the muscular layer, you actually have elastic fibers. What do you think the purpose of those elastic fibers are? To stretch, recoil. Okay? This is why arteries are able to recoil. Okay? It's because of these elastic fibers. Now, the outermost layer, again, there's no space, but it's not that thick, it's a big thin layer. It's a connective tissue layer. The connective tissue layer. Now that is the structure of an artery. It has three layers. Endothelium, which is epithelium, then it has a muscular layer, which is made up of smooth muscles and it contains elastic fibers, and the outermost layer, which is connective tissue. That connective tissue is a protective layer. Okay? The smooth muscle is for basically for the artery to constrict or dilate. Okay? Now, the blood actually comes in contact with the endothelium. That's the layer that actually comes in contact with blood. Okay? Now let's look at the structure of a vein. Same exact structure, only difference is, so again, you have the lumen. Okay? The lumen is surrounded by endothelium, which again, there's no space. Okay? So, a vein, you have the endothelium. Then you have a muscular layer. So it has the second layer, which is again a muscular layer, okay? But the difference is, the reason I redrew it, is in an artery, the muscular is very thick. But in a vein, it's much thinner. And it has no elastic fibers. Does that make sense? That's why I redrew it, because the drawing looked the same amount of smooth muscle. And then it has an outer connective tissue layer, which is supposed to be the same.
So the blue is also the
Muscular layer, yes.
endothelium.
Yes. So the layers are called exactly the same. The difference is the endothelium in a vein and in an artery are exactly the same. The muscle layer, the second layer in both vessels is a muscle layer. But the difference is, in an artery, the muscle layer is much thicker and it has elastic fibers. In a vein, the muscle layer is much thinner and there is no elastic fibers. The third layer in both vessels is the connective tissue, which is for protection. It's the same. Okay? So it's the muscular layer that makes a difference. This is why a vein can hold a large amount of volume under less pressure, because it doesn't have elastic fibers, so it will stretch. Where artery, as soon as it stretches, the elastic fiber causes to come back. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the largest artery in our body is the aorta. Okay, the largest body in our body is aorta. Now, aorta actually has multiple subdivisions. Okay, you have the arch of aorta, then you have the thoracic aorta, then you have the abdominal aorta. And in the lab, you'll notice, it just tells you because as the aorta comes out of the heart, it produces an arch. It comes out like that, okay? And therefore, it's called the arch of the aorta. Then, if it's found, if that aorta, it comes out and extends down. If that part of the aorta is found in the thoracic cavity, it's called thoracic aorta. If it's found within the abdominal cavity, it's called the abdominal aorta. Does that make sense? But you will learn that in lab, because when you actually have the pigs. Now, the largest vein in our body, they're called the vena cavas. Vena cavas. There are two, vena cavas are the largest veins, but there are actually two veins put together. Not put together, but classified. So there's superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Okay, so there are two main vena cavas. Superior tends to drain blood from the superior half of our body. It collects blood from the superior half of our body and drains it to the heart. Where the inferior vena cava collects blood from the inferior part of our body and drains blood into the heart. Does that make sense? Okay. Now let's talk about arterial in a minute. Carries oxygenated blood. Okay, it has oxygenated blood. Largest drop in blood pressure. So, when you go from an artery to arterial, you'll see a significant drop in blood pressure. Okay? Then, from going from arterial to capillary, yes, blood pressure drops, but it's not that significant. It might just drop, let's say, 10 to 15 millimeters per mercury. But when you actually go from artery to arterial, it tends to drop like 40 millimeters per mercury. Okay, so this is the largest drop in blood pressure. Now, your arterioles, actually at the beginning of our arterioles, you have a splinter, sphincter, S-P-H-I-N-C-T-E-R. Sphincter. Sphincter is smooth muscle. Okay? So, let's say here is my structure, okay, of my arteriole. Right before it, I had an artery. And now here is an arteriole. Right where it's changing into arteriole, you have a sphincter. It's a smooth muscle that goes around. okay? And that actually acts like a door. If the sphincter relaxes, then what happens, it causes the diameter of the arteriole to get bigger. So therefore, more blood can enter the arteriole. Does that make sense? When that smooth muscle, the sphincter constricts, like contracts, then basically it causes the diameter of the arteriole to get smaller and blood cannot enter. Does that make sense? So what do you think the purpose of, what is the main purpose of that? Of constricting and dilating? What do you think the main reason we have it, or the importance of it? Control what? Blood pressure. So when you, let's say, have a drop in blood pressure, do you think that sphincter is going to constrict or relax? It's going to relax. When you have a drop in blood pressure, it's going to constrict. Why? Because a drop in blood pressure means that your arteries don't have that much volume, right? How do you increase a pressure? Is if you retain the blood in the arteries. So what happens, the smooth muscle on the sphincter will contract, therefore the lumen of or the diameter of the arteriole gets smaller, so less blood enters the arteriole, more blood stays within the arteries. Does that make sense? And your blood pressure goes up.
So it regulates blood pressure?
Yes.
Okay, so the drop in blood pressure means that the sphincter contracts? Okay, and then
Just think,
increase
you
in
have
blood
less
pressure.
blood right here. You have a drop in blood pressure.
Uh-huh.
How would you increase this? Because blood is going this way, right?
Yeah.
If you have a decrease right here, and if I close it, if I make the lumen this small,
Mhm.
right, by contracting, now isn't less blood going to enter? And more blood is going to stay back here.
Okay,
So wouldn't that increase the blood pressure?
yes.
Does
So
that
you
make
want
sense?
blood on that side.
Exactly. So this acts like a doorway. How much blood is going to let through?
Okay.
Now, if you have a high blood pressure, okay, if this is increased, then the smooth muscles are going to relax, therefore the diameter gets larger, more blood enters the arterioles, less blood is in the arteries, so your blood pressure drops. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yeah.
Does that make, okay. So, basically carries oxygenated blood, the largest drop in blood pressure, okay? Sphincters, which are made of smooth muscle, are at the beginning of the arterioles, okay? And therefore they regulate that sphincters, either, they act like doors, okay? And they tend to monitor the diameter of the arteriole. If the diameter gets larger, more blood can enter. If the diameter gets smaller, less blood enters, okay? So it tends to regulate the blood pressure. Now, the structure. This was, I'm just explaining you the sphincters. Okay. Now, again, you have the lumen. Okay. After the lumen, you have the endothelium. After the lumen, you have the endothelium, which again, there's no space. Then you have the muscle layer. Within the muscle layer, you have elastic fibers. Now, the difference is, when you actually compare artery and arteriole, it's just a smaller artery, okay? So everything is just smaller in size. Excuse me, does that make sense? Okay? Its artery was this big, where arteriole is this big.